if there's nothing else, shall we move on to integrated pest management? Yeah, I think we're okay. What time do we break for tea? What time do we break for tea?
Usually 11.
Okay, all right. We're going to whiz through this. Bugs and pest. Okay, all right. So here we are. What are pests? Well, I think we defined it already. So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. So pests, not humans, really four-legged creatures. They could be flying, they could be crawling, all of these different types. But really, the potential causes of when you have pest activity are basically neglected areas or objects. In the heritage sector, we call these areas dead spaces, because bugs are kind of like, they like hermitages. They don't like, big temples where lots of people are going. They like dark areas, yeah? They like dark retreat areas. Nobody is going to be there. Poor waste management, which means maybe one doesn't empty the garbage or rubbish. Do people use garbage or rubbish here? Garbage, okay. Which one's American, which one's English?
Garbage is American.
Okay, all right, yeah. Yeah, okay. I get confused. Okay, so yeah, depending on, and how do you say garbage in Tibetan? Hinik. Yes, exactly. Okay, so that's there because they need something to eat. They're like all the rest of us. But if we empty the garbage and if we clean our dead spaces and we check our dead spaces, then that's very good. This includes even sealing from where the wall meets the floor with like a sealant, not like a sealant, but with a sealant. Or you have skirting boards around and you want to seal those little areas because even rodents can get in. We mentioned that pests also like dust, yeah? So does mold, all right? You have regional pests. This is pests that's from different worlds and different regions, tropical, temperate. They have different types of pests. So maybe you have some termites here. Maybe you have moths, but what types of moths? Maybe this is a powder post beetle, they like wood, so it might not necessarily be here. We know we definitely have silverfish. You have many different species of silverfish, and mice and different birds. What we didn't put on here are monkeys. But yeah, and monkeys do cause damage to the property, to the fabric of the building. There's a broken glass there because of a monkey. I didn't see him do it, so I can't say, but somebody said that it was definitely the monkey. So yeah, maybe that's there. And I heard they go into the water tanks as well. So damage to property and or collection, wood-boring insects. We've had problems with insects eating the entire roof frames, so that can cause a problem, or even particular objects, so the structure can fall apart. Nesting rodents, both rats and birds, because as Teresa, I think it was Teresa and Mike had pointed out, when you have these bird nests, there are lots of insects that are living in those nests, and they're living in the birds. And sometimes you might even have birds that have passed on, and then the insects come and eat the birds, the carcass of the birds, and then they're like, well, I'm still hungry, so they're going to go somewhere else. Which is why another thing that we do is we clear the drains of all of the buildings, and we do a walk around the exterior of the building and interior. And this even includes like ventilating systems, yeah? All of these places you have to, you check. So nesting rodents, they'll chew through electrical equipment, yeah? The rats and stuff like that. They'll eat, they might not want to eat the manuscripts, but they might do, just because it happens to be in the way. Yeah. So they will, and then they they have a problem with going to the bathroom. So they don't go to the toilet, they go all everywhere. And then you are touching that, yeah? And that's not so good. So the more you clean your area, and this is just normal cleaning, what we call general housekeeping, and you check, are there any rodent drop-ins? Are there any insect droppings? And then you're able to know that, oh, I need to clean this area more, and why are they coming? Does somebody put a stash of cookies in their drawer? Yeah. Did somebody, leave out even you need to check when you leave offerings out as well. What's happening, and so we clean the area. So this is the nest can also block the guttering, especially in monsoon. You don't want your guttering to be blocked with a bird's nest and any other outlets. So moths, if you know what your insects like to eat, then you know where to look. So different insects will attack different things, which I think we had established already. How do you mitigate that? What's the antidote to this? So what we do is we quarantine anything that's showing evidence, or I think the Americans might use the term abatement. I've heard some. So basically, we all know about quarantine now because of COVID. So we will take the object that has mold or insect activity, and we'll put it in one area, and maybe we brush it out, or we don't put it directly into our storage area. So just regular building maintenance, is your roof intact and stuff like that? That's a good check, because sometimes even bees are considered a pest. They can make their hives inside of buildings, and then what do you do? But yeah, as we say, we want to avoid that as much as possible. So sometimes Teresa mentioned this, you see one and then, maybe you realize, oh, it's just one. But no, once there's one, more likely you're going to know that there's quite a lot. We started to see some frass here in this display case, and realized the more we looked, the more we saw. And there were termites eating the case, and then they were coming up for the objects. Yeah, and it was, a serious situation. So what you make your cases out of, or your storage areas out of, is very important. This is probably stuff that we wouldn't do here, but we just wanted to let you know that we have these little blunder traps. They're sticky traps, and unfortunately, the insects die, but people place them all along and they map them, and we then assess what different types we have and how many different types, and then you can tell what their activity is. But this is what happens in a place where people, maybe they haven't taken their bodhisattva vow, that it's okay for them, they think it's maybe not so much problems, but that you do kill the insects. People were asking about monitoring the light and humidity. So these are the data loggers that you have. You even have some data loggers that monitor vibrations as well as dust. So this is monitoring, sending a beacon. Sorry, no, it's not a beacon really. It just sends the information automatically about what the temperature and humidity is. This one is sending the light, and this one is monitoring your insect activity. Which is something that we do, but if you don't have one of those, you do handheld, and sometimes there are cheaper ones that you have to download. Or there was one that was a pen one that you can determine, because if someone says, oh, it's very hot in here, well, what temperature is it? And how does the temperature change? So you map the changes in temperature. But this is very, fancy stuff that happens in big international institutions. But you walk into a room and it feels hot. So maybe you might use a fan, inside there. So it could be both from the very complicated, area where you will suck out all of the oxygen within the space so that you don't have a fire. Other times it's about opening the areas and circulating the air and making sure it's clean. Both ways will help. Yes, Jampal.
So we decided that what we'll do is to try and get through as fast as we can to give you an idea of what's happening. So this was put out by the English Heritage. It's used in other countries as well. but basically you have like a host of the types of insects that attack particular objects in historic, religious and museum environments. So you have the actual size of the insects, and then you have the adult, what they eat, etc. There are websites that you can, if you find insects, you can look under magnification and check to see what they are. So museumspest.net. We have all these resources online. It's good to know what eats your collection, or what's eating your collection. I think that was a conference or a book at one point. Because then you know what is going to be most vulnerable. So if you have silverfish, we know what they like to eat. If you have termites, we know what they like to eat. So it's just the principles across. And then this is if people who are like killing insects, they trap them on these sticky traps, and then you just track to see, well, how many of the different types of insects you have, and then say this is, if in winter maybe it gets very high. In Europe they have a problem because they're turning on the heating, so instead of one life cycle you are getting 3 life cycles of the insects. Again, keeping things cold and clean is good. So then we know, well, what's happening and which room are they in. So we're basically tracking all of their activities. What do they like to eat? Where are they mainly located? How are they getting in? And how can we fortify our areas? So that's what happens there. We don't have the magic answer for insect prevention. What does work, and we know it works to help to reduce, is by doing the regular cleaning. So this is up on scaffolding, clean because the insects like the dust, and then anything that's organic they also really like to eat. So you have to check your collections and you have to clean regularly is normally all we could do. Again, if you monitor the environment and then you try to reduce the numbers of pests, you improve your condition of your shell, meaning your building. The more you improve with the ventilation, the cupboards, the doors, how the dust can get in onto your windowsills, the better it is. And it has to be, again, I'm reiterating that it is integrated. It has to be integrated, everybody. So these are the traps. I'm so sorry you're seeing dead insects, but whatever they eat, they tend to be the same color, comes out of them. This is a major infestation on the blunder traps, and this is treating basically at low temperature. Again, this is different rooms, but we'll move on to that. So just like how you have the statues out there, the mannequins, which have wool, then maybe we would put, if we were in a museum environment and if we were into killing insects, then we would check there and put a trap. Or if we can't kill insects, we would go and we would look. Is there any frass? Is there any dust? Sorry. All right. Low temperature, -20, walk-in freezer. I didn't have that possibility at one point, so I went to ice cream factory. Then you can treat by vacuum packing, but in a special type of material that's inert. So lots of different ways if it's okay for the person to kill. And then just training your staff into looking for identifying insect activity. We walked around because sometimes people look and they don't see. So you have to look. Is there any mold? Is there any water ingress? Are there any insects? Is there frass? Am I seeing the case-bearing clothes moth? This is a little bit complicated, but all that happens is we know where the food is. So this is, again, a map of how the V&A does, the Victorian Museum in London, the Victorian Albert Museum, how they deal with theirs, is they identify where their organic material, where they're most at risk, where is there areas where the food is, and they just color code it. So they know what would be most attacking. Yeah? And then you know, well, what's most vulnerable. So very vulnerable are your furs, your organic material. Less vulnerable might be your sculpture objects. If they're not Buddhist, meaning if they don't have stuff inside. Yeah, because then they would be vulnerable. And then this is the same thing that you'll be mapping where your loggers are. This is in another museum, where your dust monitors are, where your environmental monitors are. So you keep track of everything. So if you get an area where you have lots of humidity and you're having lots of insect activity, then maybe you put your logger there. So it's like, it's just a plan to fortify. And then this is some verbiage about the types of that we go all together. This is our key principles, you know, that new acquisitions coming in, new gifts coming in might be it, and it's the responsibility of all staff to be aware of the threat that insects propose. So don't keep your inside your library, don't have your stash of biscuits, even tea or even wool, those sorts of things that we want to be looking at. Okay. It's a bit of a whirlwind, but it is a balance, so that's why this is on a thing here. We can't keep it, no museum, no institution, no monastery, anything can keep the space completely insect-free, but we can make it insect-unfriendly as possible.
So I'm just going to go really very quickly. Here in the museum, there's two things. We have the manuscripts storage, and this is a really good example of where you might be able to stop the bugs from coming in. So here in the manuscript storage, it's very clean. Things are done very, very well. It's very, very good. But then there's just a couple of issues. Oops. They have these big dehumidifiers, and they seem to be working. One of the things that, you know, they have some temperature and humidity monitoring, and they seem to be keeping it stable. But one of the things that's very important, if you have an enclosed room and you have a lot of books in it, the books are actually the thing that's keeping your temperature and humidity very stable. The books are absorbing and deabsorbing humidity. So we don't really know if these are working. And there's one issue, well, there's two issues with these machines. We're not really sure if they're working properly. And then the filter here is you're no longer able to buy the filters for these particular machines. And so what's happening is there's some kind of plant material that's being used to filter them, and that's a filter that keeps the dirt from going inside the machine and making it break down. So this is a possible problem with insects. They like this, and they'll come in with it. The next issue, oops, let me go, let's see if it'll do it, is this machine has to vent to the outside. And so the window has had a screen put on it, and then a board put on the outside, and a hole cut. You can see that's light. That's light coming in from the outside. So that means there's no screen, there's nothing. The insects can just find that space and come directly into the collection. So if you fix this, and there's ways of fixing that, you could put a rubber seal around it. You can plug up these holes. You know, those are the kind of things you need to think about in your own collections if you have this type of space, and start looking about it. Then you've got the windows. That's the next thing. Oops, went the wrong way. Okay. I think this is sideways. To go that way. Yes. I'm not sure if you can see that, but you've got the windows. It's open. There's this bit right here is open to the outside. And so what I've been told is the pigeons, there's a lot of pigeons around here, they sneak in here and they make nests, lay their eggs, and have babies. And then all the detritus from that is the insects love it. They live in, even when there's a bird in the nest, the bird itself has a type of mite which can cause problems with your, it will eat organic material. And then there's two types of things that really, really like birds' nests, and it's something called a carpet beetle, which is a little tiny black beetle. Have any of you seen these little black beetles? You seen them in your collection? Little beetle. Very tiny. I'm going to show you a picture of it next, I hope. Anyway, so, oops. Then that's just a better picture of the gap. And then,
Would you want to clean the netting as well?
yes. I mean, I'll go back to that.
Yeah.
The netting is also, the netting's not actually up against this. So you would have to try and figure a way to make this gap in here between the netting and this sealed. So you want to seal the outside and seal this. But the netting itself really needs to be cleaned. You need, it traps dust. And so one of the things that a lot of people do that have screens on their windows is they'll have a maintenance where once or twice a year they literally clean the screens off. And this keeps bird feces and things and insects and everything that have got caught on there and died from being on your screen, which also attract a lot of other insects. So all these insects are quite cannibalistic. They live off dead things. So wherever there's any kind of dead thing, they will come to it and eat it, lay their eggs, and then they just start a huge infestation. So, and you can see it also, because there's this big gap here, you're letting a lot of dirt and dust in. And so you really want to reduce that, because that's where your insects hang out. And so sadly, this is in the building. This is upstairs in one of the cases. If you can see, this is the little beetle I'm talking about. Do you all have this little beetle? Okay, they're very voracious. And if you can see the feathers on the arrows, which is a ritual implement, they're being eaten. And some of them the feathers are almost gone. And that's purely insect damage. So it's really, and then they're dying too, but a lot of these are alive still. Let's see, let's go. Here's one that was outside. And this is very important to see. It's not a very good image, but you see the beetle here. You see his back shell is slightly open. He's got his wings out. He flies. I have a really great, I'll just see if we can, and then it's all throughout the case. The more I looked, the more I saw the insect damage, or the insects. They were live, they were dead, and again, they'll just eat each other. Once they're dead, they live off each other. And, oops, where am I gone? Gone the wrong way. Oops, sorry, this is the object. And it's in a case, and I'm not sure how easy it is to get into this case. So it's also something you need to think about when you design cases. You need to be able to open them. And so when you have insect infestations, you really want to make sure that the case is openable. So it needs cleaning. There's always going to be dust inside a case, and dust is what attracts your insects. And the important thing about this one, even though it isn't usually attractive to insects, once the insects eat all those feathers that I showed you, they also they adapt to what's in their environment. And so if there's a heavy infestation in this case, they will start eating the object, this object. And this object, if this, you all know how these are made, I think. And once you start breaking the strings, once you start eating, and they can eat through one of these strings in a day, then you start getting, the whole thing starts falling apart. So that would be very, very sad to see. Okay, this is what I'm not sure this is going to come up. Okay, let's do that. Okay, there he is. And if you notice, if there's one right there. Oh, and this one is the really interesting one. You have to understand insect behavior. This insect, he's looking to fly away. He is actually thinking about, where the heck can I go next? He's literally surveying where he might find his food. So these are so destructive. They can fly anywhere. They're very easily moved around by the wind. But you know, there's a lot of dead bodies and then there's live ones in there. And it's so important. Once you see this, you have to clean it. You absolutely have to clean your case. You need to get in there, brush all the live insects into a little box and, you know, bless them and take them somewhere else. But you need to clean out all the dead ones too. And they need to be disposed of, and you need to really think about cleaning that. And this is not the only case that we saw live insects in upstairs. Sadly, one of the sculptures, one of the, on the bottom, there's massive, you know, around the back of it, there's a massive infestation. And it's interesting when you photograph the object from the front, the way you and I look at it, the evidence of that infestation is towards the back. Why do you think that is? Okay, you've got lights shining on the object this way. You're looking at the object this way. It's got a lot of lights hitting it. What happens in the back? How does the light, what's the light like in the back? A shadow. It's in a shadow. They don't like light. These guys are they're being a little exception because they can't get out of the light. So they're, you know, that's why he's looking to fly away. He wants to go someplace where it's dark. So he's looking for a dark space. And they do this, they have receptors in their eyes that are very sensitive to light, and they will go for the dark space. They will look, their receptors will see this, and they'll go for the dark space. So that infestation in the sculpture is at the back. You can only see it at the back of so you have to walk around and look. You literally have to go around and look at the back of the sculpture. And if you see a whole lot of debris, you know you have an infestation. In that particular case, there's debris and live insects, exactly like this. One of the most important things that if I can identify this, we then will know that there's scientists out there who know the behavior of this insect. And if we can find out the behavior of this insect, then we can base our preventative stuff on its behavior. So if we know it likes the dark, likes to proliferate in the dark, we make sure that we don't give it any dark spaces that it can hide in. If it likes moisture, we try and keep the moisture levels up, or down, sorry, down. And then, you know, it leads on from there. It might, you know, there's another preventative way of dealing with things, because you've been asking us all these questions, is that if we found out what it really likes, what its most favorite food is, you can actually make a little trap, put the food inside this trap, and I'm not saying a killing trap, but a little trap that they can go in and can't come out, and then you can maybe attract them all to this little trap, and then you can take them outside and leave them. There is one thing that you can do with moth. There is a trap, it's called a lure trap, but it's a sticky trap and it kills them. Is that it's a little square triangle. Moths like these triangles for some reason. They have receptors that they want to go to this triangle. And so that's another thing about this little insect. We could maybe find out what kind of shapes it likes, if it likes a hole or a triangle or a square, and then you can attract it to these things. So then you can get them all there and then take them away. But the moth lure trap is, they've developed a little sachet that you put into the sticky trap. They like the triangle shape. They smell, it's only for the males, I'm sorry. It's a lure to attract the male moth. They go into this trap. Sadly, they die. It's not a very nice death either. It's pretty horrible. And then that means if you trap all the males, then you don't get the reproductive cycle going. And so it's another way to slow down moth infestations. And it's also another way to see how bad your moth infestation is. So if I was in a place where they were putting out the lures, and I literally would pull the traps out and the entire thing would be covered with moths, and live ones, and ones stacked on top of each other, some of them even mating. So, you know, it was really interesting. And that told us that we had a very serious moth infestation. Yeah, so it's an indicator of how bad your moth infestation is. But again, it's a kill trap, so it's not something that I would suggest here, but you could do a triangle box and see if you could put some kind of screen that they can't come back out, you know, and see if you can trap a lot of moth in the box and then take them outside. I don't know. It's an interesting study. The electronic ones usually only work for flies and flying insects. And most of these, other than the moth, and flies are a problem too. If you have a bad fly infestation, they leave their little tar everywhere, and then other insects like that. If you had a lot of flying insects, if you had a lot of flies that were actually depositing stuff all over your objects, then yes. And this does happen in the monasteries where the butter lamps are and where the tonkas come down. I've seen fly specks all over the bottom of the tonkas, and then I've seen where insects have eaten it. So you know, but they kill. So it could be a really good, something very good, but it only attracts flying insects. And so most of the insects that are going to eat your collection, other than moth, are floor. They're on the floor, and they don't. This little guy flies, but he doesn't fly like that, and he's not attracted to something like that. It's got something to do with the type of insect body. They have different, you know, categories. So so yeah, he wouldn't be attracted to that. Yeah, it's.